Welcome to our Line Opinion panelists. This week we're happy to be joined by Algernon Damasa. He's investigative and enterprise reporter at the Las Cruces Sun News. Attorney Sophie Martin joins us, and it's great to see former State Rep. Justine Fox Young with us as well. Thank you all for being here. For the second week in a row, we start with new developments in the sexual harassment accusations against Senator Daniel Ivey Soto. Breaking as we tape this, Senator Ivey Soto resigned his position as chair of the Senate Rules Committee after being removed from the Finance Authority Interim Committee over the weekend. Democratic Senate leadership had planned to meet to discuss his removal later on Thursday this week, but Mr. Ivey Soto made the decision for him. What changed? Let me start with Algernon here. He had been pretty defiant, Algernon, on this idea of due process. What changed here in your view? It's hard to guess, certainly. We weren't in the room, but any guesses on what you think may have happened?
What made a huge difference was the Santa Fe Reporter getting its hands on an investigative report that showed that 2 of the 3 findings had been substantiated, whereas the senator had been making statements implying that there were no adverse findings and essentially implying that he had been exonerated when that was not the case. And so that's an example of the way leaks have been playing out in a process that does not have enough sunlight. Leaks become very powerful and they can be weaponized in various ways. And you have also this plot line about the Senate President Pro Tem, Mimi Stewart, basically threatening to leak the report if leak documentation if the senator did not yield some of his leadership positions. And so lots of accusations back and forth, but hey, why, one way to sort of de-weaponize and demilitarize leaks is to revise our processes so that they are still fair and accountable, but you don't have things operating in secret.
Sophie, interestingly, that op-ed by Mr. Ivey Soto in the Journal a week or so ago claiming his innocence really took this to a whole nother place. I'm curious, looking back, at your thoughts on that, but then also stitch it to what we've learned today, where it just seemed like he was in a corner and really didn't have many options. Did he paint himself in a corner?
I assume that on Thursday, he basically did a head count and realized that he wasn't going to prevail here.
Right.
I think that so let me just say I'm a lawyer, but I also work in communications and have for many years. And one of the real challenges in moments like what Ivey Soto was confronted with is you want to clear your name, you want to get your side of the story out, you want to spin. But it seemed clear to me that he wrote that op-ed, or his team wrote that op-ed, however it worked for in that circumstance, on the assumption that they were safe in terms of what they were saying, that they were protected. And this is one of the real challenges in situations like this when, for instance, an accuser can't tell their side of the story publicly because of a gag type situation, and the accused can kind of go out there with feeling some confidence that their side of the story won't be rebutted publicly. This really, to Algernon's point, this could have, I suppose, gone a little differently if the leak hadn't happened, or at least taken quite a bit longer for the rest of the information to come out. I think right now the commentary about look, you can't really look at a deadlocked panel given the findings that were issued. You can't look at a deadlocked panel and say, oh, exonerated.
Right.
And to that end, one of the imperfections of our legal process and the process that we see here is that we have the presumption, of course, in our criminal courts of innocence. It's not the same presumption necessarily in other areas, but a deadlock, a mistrial, things like that, that's not exoneration. And that's how Ivey Soto tried to spin this. And so now he's got 2 problems. He's got the underlying claims, but then he also has, I think, got to deal with this issue of whether he can be trusted in his public statements and potentially as private statements in the future. That kind of spin often comes back to bite the person who tries it.
That's an interesting point there. Representative Fox Young, I got a quote from Mr. Ivy Soto, quote, it's from a letter, by the way, he has submitted with his resignation. I know I still have much to learn about being a servant leader, and I commit myself to improvement in that area. The problems we face are too great, and we must all work together. My question is, what happens next? Obviously, the full Senate and the full deal would have to remove him, with a 2/3 vote in the 42-member Senate. Is that a possibility at this point, or is there enough mea culpa here that he can just kind of move on and just maybe improve himself and keep going? What's your sense of that?
Well, my first thought is the fact that we have to sit here and try to read the tea leaves to figure out what happens next shows you how screwed up this process is and how murky it's been. I mean, I don't know what else you'd expect from a legislature that is policing itself. They've created this star chamber / whatever it is. But it's very problematic. There's no predictability for all the stakeholders and the accused and the public. I mean, what is going on up there? Mimi Stewart's taken the helm. Senator Stewart is meting out punishment now. I mean, it's a banana republic. So I don't know what's going to happen. I think from a PR perspective, perhaps Senator Ivy Soto has done enough to calm things down for a short time, but I could critique his handling of the situation all day.
Sure.
It's been really bungled. But as Algernon says, the process is so flawed.
Right.
I hope what comes out of this is some more predictability and some reform of how this works. It shouldn't be done in such an opaque way.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's the whole problem, right, with the Me Too movement. I mean, we're trying to get to a place where we can arrive at the truth, we can arrive at a just solution without getting to cancel culture, without having all the vitriol and litigating these things in the press. Everything went wrong here.
Right. Right.
So I don't know what happens to him, but this process needs to be fixed.
Algernon, on that point, this idea of the 4 people voting on someone's political future, and we don't know how they vote. And now Daniel Ely this week, Representative Ely this week is saying, look, we need a 5th member here who knows about these harassment issues, who's not an elected person, to break ties. Is the public going to be accepting of people voting on people's future and not knowing how they voted in these things? I mean, there's something almost Banana Republic, which was just mentioned, about that as well.
Yeah, I mean, it addresses part of the problem, but I'm not sure it goes far enough. And I don't think, I think that in the session, they're going to have to look at statutory changes to how this works, because we can talk a lot about due process. We can talk a lot about the presumption of innocence. And these are concepts that we understand as part of a open proceedings, civil trials, criminal trials, in which there is an independent judge and evidence that is presented generally in public settings. And that's not what we have here. We don't have that kind of process. You have senators voting about colleagues. And of course, these people have their own relationships and their own pressures. I would not want to be a senator who crosses ways with someone like Senator Ivy Soto. I would not want to be, part of the problem here is that we have lobbyists and people who've been affected by his behavior who have very important matters coming before his committees as well as the Senate as a whole. And so really, I mean, I don't know that a 5th vote, what that addresses is the problem of a tie. And you introduce somebody who is not an elected member of that body, who is an attorney, who has some professional expertise in the area. Certainly there's some improvement there, but I think it's a drop in the bucket.
Gotcha.
Honestly.
Sophie, real quick, got to give you the last word on this. This is not a difficult prediction. Let's say he does stay, and every woman up there just basically shuts him out. Do you know what I'm saying here? They just don't deal with him at all. What good does that do him to stay in an environment like that? Because you can pretty much guarantee if he skates through on this, that's pretty much what he's going to find next session.
I think unfortunately, Jean, and I apologize for saying this to you, but I think that's naive.
Okay.
Because because to the extent that he retains any form of power in the system, the first time he's a determinative vote on a piece of legislation, he's the one you've got to turn. The constituents, the lobbyists, et cetera, will not have a choice but to work with him.
Right.
And in the boiler room that is the legislature, it's not going to take that long for people to realize we can't ostracize a particular member forever.
Right.
I got to say, of the process as a whole, it's unfortunate that I've been thinking of it as a stress test of this system. Has happened at this time and has gone so badly. The stress test is going to happen eventually.
That's right.
I hope, as Algernon said, I hope that there are more significant improvements made to the system, reforms made, because it's very apparent that that's needed.
Good points there. Thanks to our line opinion panel on that one. We'll meet back here at the virtual roundtable in about 10 minutes to talk about the Secretary of State's race and the potential campaign finance violation that's been stirring headlines this week.